everyone, my name is Kathleen. I'm 23 years old. I'm diagnosed with bipolar with rapid cycling features, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. I wanted to start doing just a little more casual type of vlog to talk about mental health and make it not so taboo and not so serious as sometimes it can be plagued out to be. Yes, it is serious, but talking about it doesn't always have to be so anxiety provoking. Today I just wanted to get you guys to get to know me a little bit, so I'm just going to run down a little bit of the history of my symptoms when I started to notice that things were different, little things that I think may have played into it, but I'm not going to do a full long story time, I'm gonna just give you the gist today. So, I'll start with when I noticed things were different for me from other kids. As far as I dealt with some bullying as a really young child, like right going into kindergarten and right into kindergarten, I went to my babysitter's and I was friends with her daughter, and her daughter had a best friend at school, and these girls were probably 2 years older than me. Anyway, I guess she would be jealous of our friendship if we had played together at recess. She didn't want all of us to play, so she would push me down the slide and pull my hair every single day for a long time until I finally told my grandma about it. My grandma went to the school to do something about it, and that just made me feel weirdly guilty at that time. I still had other friends, obviously. This girl wasn't even my best friend. It was just this bully I just remember that having an impact on the way that I interacted with people in the future, kind of just always more cautiously, but that also plays into some of home life stuff as well. Excuse me. About second grade, I noticed that every day about recess time, the bullying had stopped. I mean, at that point, I just didn't have recess with my best friend at the time, and I didn't know that was what was happening at the time, but I would get headaches so bad every single day, or almost every day, that I was going to the nurse. And eventually my grandma took me to the doctor, and he told her they're tension headaches. They're essentially just from me like clenching my teeth and like tensing up from being anxious. And so that's just what we learned about it, and then I was just, kids are anxious and we can move on and things are fine. I started to feel really hyper responsible for my surroundings around that time. I felt responsible for things that children shouldn't feel responsible about, like making sure that your family has enough money and making sure that you're working hard and everyone else in your life is working hard. Stability was just important to me because I didn't have a lot of stability. After my mom was sentenced, I lived with my mom's parents, and then I was legally adopted or legally given custody to my father, but actually lived with his parents for the majority of my childhood, and then lived with him and his ex-wife from about middle school until I graduated high school. So because of that, I just didn't like and still don't like not knowing exactly what's going to happen. It's just as simple as that. I wrote some of this down because I didn't want to forget. I didn't feel really like I had a place, or like I necessarily was wanted or needed or purposeful, and that feeling has plagued me throughout my entire life, but it just made me feel empty and dull. And because of that feeling, at about middle school, I started to get just overwhelming anxiety that would just, like I couldn't even communicate with other people. At this time I was living with my dad and his ex-wife. My sister was about to be born. It was just too much change, and so I began to self-harm around 11, give or take, and that continued all the way until last October, which I'm very proud of myself for making it this far. But it has been easily the most difficult part of my mental health journey to overcome, and something that the thoughts are still kind of scary and intrusive, even though I don't act upon them and I don't default to think about them when I'm nervous or anxious or scared anymore. Sometimes they just, like, they're intrusive. They just pop up into your brain and you're just like, whoa, what? And you just move on. It's like, well, that was ridiculous, and you just move on. So middle school I started feeling depression. I didn't know I just thought I was angsty teen and, an emo kid, and I spent a lot of time on the internet, which, like, way too much time on the internet. I was basically raised by the internet, but at this point in this day and age, weren't we all kind of? The internet. Where do I go from here? So, depression. I mean, I don't really know how to explain. My depression, when I feel depressed, has always been very atypical. So, sleeping a lot, eating a lot, laying around a lot, just like nothingness, and just crying all the time. It just like the weight of the world is just laying on you. To breathe is hard. It hurts to breathe. It hurts to, like, be alive, but you don't want to hurt anybody else, so you're just like someone with waiting on death row, essentially, just waiting out your time. That's how my depression felt. And even in middle school, even at such a young age, it was that heavy for me. Which I think is just a sign of what was going to be to come, which is the fun that is bipolar disorder. About high school, the anxiety turned into panic. I had my first panic attack that I can remember that wasn't just anxiety, but like an actual physical reaction. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My chest hurt. I couldn't breathe. When I was someone had just gotten their license, I think, what was happening, and I've got a mile long list of things that make me generally anxious, and car driving and car accidents and people that not being a driver of a car, nothing happened. Nothing even happened. It was just the thought that something could have happened, and then I was with such an inexperienced driver, even though they were driving perfectly fine, that just struck some kind of primal fear in me. And from then on, I just had panic attacks a couple times a week for probably up until the time I was 21, so from 14 to 21. That's a long time. 15 to 21 probably. I don't know. That's a lot of panic attacks. I'm surprised I didn't die of a heart attack. Learning how to manage panic. Oh my god. High school is never fun for anyone. Because I didn't feel accepted or comfortable in my group of friends, I didn't feel comfortable with my teammates in the activity that I was in, not by any fault of their own. It was just like this own. And around this time, I think I started to experience my first symptoms of like a mixed episode or manic episodes. Never a full-blown manic episode, but you just go from feeling like horribly depressed and like shit to feeling pretty good and being able to get things done and have a lot of energy. You don't need to sleep. Your grades are great. My grades are always great because that was the one shining achievement that I could show that would make my dad proud of me. So I was always like, but I have good grades. I just wrapped everything else up in a tiny box and shoved it down inside of me and was like, but I have grades. So when all of the feelings of panic, anxiety, depression, not fitting in social situations, kind of being an ugly duckling, and being a social misfit hits these like weird hypomanic, manic phases that you have no idea what they were. I didn't actually even know I was experiencing mania or a mixed episode until I was hospitalized the first time, which is why I had misdiagnosed just severe clinical depression with the two comorbid, anxiety disorders. But that obviously doesn't help, not being on a mood stabilizer and just being on an antidepressant when you actually indeed have bipolar disorder. But when the manic or hypomanic episodes are small, or you don't really want to tell people that you're feeling weird because you're feeling better, because then you just look better to other people too, unless you're like breaking into psychosis and delusions, or you like get a credit card, or start being really having a lot of like promiscuous, unprotected sex, just making impulsive, wild decisions, stealing a lot, fires. Those are big marker signals for mania, yes, but then it can be so much subtler. Hypomania is so much subtler and so much more difficult to catch. So that's when I started to feel paranoid, right about 16. I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. Sometimes I cannot sleep for days, but I still feel good, like I'm still getting everything done. Sometimes I feel really, really, really confident in what I'm doing and like really creative. When I'm feeling really creative, now I know I'm headed into a hypomanic episode because I'm not a creative person. If I start, I'm gonna draw something from scratch for you, you might as well be like, let's go take a 5 and just meditate on that for a second, because you need to calm down. And being paranoid and not really understanding that, for one, nobody's paying that much attention to you, and for two, those thoughts, people are just not simply not having them, but they feel so, the feel of judgment. And when you're in high school, there is some judgment. My high school class was incredibly small. Everybody knew everybody who knows everybody because it's so small. There's less than 100 kids in my graduating class. There's like 400 kids in my whole high school. So there is a little bit of that too as well, that weird hometown vibe, and judgment. And I live in Missouri, so I live in yeehaw country, to be fairly honest with you, and I've never been a yeehaw girl. So that does come with a little bit of scrutiny when you're growing up. But not nearly as much as I had perceived or felt, that I just didn't fit in with any of my friends, any of my teammates, any of my classmates, any of my family, anyone that existed on the same plane of existence as me. And then I discovered that, yeah, alcohol can not only get you drunk, which I had already kind of been drinking, sometimes get introduced to alcohol at an early age when you live in such a small town and you don't have a lot of money because there's nothing to do. But then I learned that you could just black out. You could drink so much that you didn't have to remember anything. And people thought it was funny. It's not funny. It's fucking dangerous. It's fucking dangerous, and it sets up horrible, dangerous habits. And I had that habit on and off from 16 till about 19, or maybe even 20. Binge drinking. Not drinking every day, not getting, it wasn't like but it was a problem. I mean, not to, it was more to quarrel with anxiety. I didn't crave alcohol. I just craved the feeling of not feeling the way I was feeling. And so every weekend, and when I got into college, I started switching calories from food for alcohol, and I was going to class, drinking on the weekends, like massive, just giant amounts of alcohol, consuming almost no food, and just for a whole semester, still getting pretty good grades, like all this time. And it wasn't until I was like a week from finals in my freshman year of college that the depression had gotten to a point where it wasn't just like a numb feeling, it was like hitting a nerve. It just hurt. Every day it just hurt. To be alive, existing just hurt. And I didn't want to have to wait it out anymore. I just wanted it to be over with actively. So I was just actively suicidal, not like just very much a lot of ideation. And so I moved back home, and I moved in with my aunt. And luckily, thankfully, and gratefully, I'm very thankful for her and always will be, she helped me figure out a psychiatrist and a counselor, and everything was a lot better for a while. But I had only been diagnosed with the depression and the anxiety disorders at this point. And I didn't know that I was going to have such a sneaky mixed episode, right? So I finished my associate's degree. I came back, went to community college, which people should on community college, but I learned like a lot, not just in class, but from your classmates, because you are in class with people from all different walks of life, and most generally, not in every case, but more largely than I've seen at four-year universities, they're paying for it and they want to learn. Like, they're there because a lot of the time they're non-traditional students, so they want to learn, but they have a lot to teach you in the way that they've just experienced life. It's awesome, I thought. Learning about people, my degree, if I ever finish my last 5 credits, is in communication studies. I just love learning about people and the way they interact with other people and the way they interact with media. It's just all very, like, interesting. So I was just on, and I go to finish for my 4-year school. Whatever, finish my 4-year degree. And I'm living with several roommates and my current boyfriend, and in this really small apartment, I'm only having like just an antidepressant at this point, and I have the worst episode of depression I've ever had in my entire life. But it wasn't a depressive episode, it was actually a mixed episode. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I couldn't sleep. I just knew it was just bad. And it got to the point where I was actually having delusions and hallucinations related to depression. So I was having a psychotic break, but a depressive psychotic break. It didn't last very long, and it wasn't like my entire world was like split into some kind of different reality, but it was more like because I couldn't sleep, because of the insomnia from the mixed episode, which is, a mixed episode is when you feel both depression and mania at the same time to some degree. And because of that, I would just, like, my brain just was like, couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle the anxiety, the depression, and the sleeplessness, and so I started having, like, waking visualizations of my own dead body hanging from a tree, like, with, like I had hung myself. And it was the most horrifying thing, still to this day, I think I've ever experienced. And that was my first trip to a a psychiatric hospital, or behavioral health ward, as we call them on the behavioral health ward. I've had one other hospitalization since then, mostly, yes, another depressive episode. Obviously, I carry, like, the depressive episodes they're heavier, harder to deal with. They personally hit me harder and affect me hardest, but that's not the case for everyone with bipolar. And like I mentioned earlier, I have features of rapid cycling, which means I have more than 4 mood episodes a year, or 4 or more, mood episodes a year. Generally, mine kind of are led by the seasons and like the sun and the amount of time I get. Obviously, there are triggers that make it worse. What I'm getting at is that my second one was just kind of like a med change, because the first couple years you just gotta learn if meds are right for you, what meds are right for you, and how you're going to get your bipolar disorder from being in disorder to being in order, which means like managing and treating it and just still living and maintaining a happy life, which is what I would like this channel to be, or this series to be. And I just wanted to give you guys a little brief, now that I'm staring at the camera, it's saying 21 minutes, so not so brief, rundown of my personal story and my personal story of my symptoms. If you'd like me to go into detail about any more that I've shared, explain more about my symptoms, my stays in the hospital, my childhood to a certain extent, my experience with school, my experience with just depression, just anxiety, or just mania, but just let me know in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.